Okay, hello. Um, okay, I'm starting a video now. Time to be in video mood. To be honest, today I am not feeling so great. Or at least this evening. Yeah, today. I'm gonna take off my glasses again. You can just see my face better. I think the lighting is really weird because I'm filming in the car. So it's kind of weird. I should just film not in a car, but I'm in a car. It's like the quietest place. It's got good sound quality. It's where I like to do audio dramas for that reason. Anyway, uh, I'm not feeling great today. So why don't we just do a video? That sounds like a good idea. So, hey, you can't see my cool kid choker. Anyway, I want me to show it off. Let's get to the video. I'm getting distracted. What was I doing the video? Oh yeah, I wanted to do a video about Christian media because this is a topic close to my heart. I love media and I love Christianity. I love Christ. And I love media. And there's a problem because Christians have been doing some weird things with media recently. Traditionally, Christians have been very involved in media, and some really big things have come from that. For instance, Lord of the Rings, a literary, you know, just awesome thing. I'm trying to think of like what we would call it, you know, very big thing, and still a big thing. Narnia is a great example. A lot of I got water here. ASMR. A lot of big artists were Christians in the old times, but recently, media has and Christianity have strayed away, along with science and Christianity. Science, in the old times, all big name scientists were Christians. Very big names like what's his name? Albert Einstein. Not Albert Einstein. Sorry, he was not Christian. He was Jewish, and he wasn't really that. I said Albert Einstein. I meant Sir Isaac Newton. He was a Christian. Albert Einstein was kind of like when the started swinging, and then when what's the guy not made evolution, but came up with the theory? Darwin. He started the kind of swing from Christianity, separation between Christianity and science. Anyway, this is not about science and Christianity. This is about media, but they kind of run in parallel. They both kind of separated. I better get talking about media, or I'm gonna run out of space on my phone. So, Christianity and media have separated in our current culture, and Christians are starting to try to reclaim media in some way. But I have some gripes with certain ways it's been done because, well, this is the thing. I think this is one of the big problems. Christians many times go to do media stuff not because they're trying to get better at their art and their craft, but instead they're trying to evangelize. And I mean, evangelism isn't wrong. It's a very good thing. Sorry, I really like my choker. I'm like, how do I show it? Anyway, I just bought it. Anyway, that's my ADHD. I'm like, ooh. Anyway, evangelism is not a bad thing. Evangelism is very good, but it it messes with stories and art in general if your goal isn't to get better at your craft. So, I see this a lot in Christian movies. You don't see this in Christian music as much. Christian music is a little bit more diverse. It's been kind of growing. It's been growing for longer than Christian movies. But you see this in Christian movies where the goal is to get to the big salvation scene. And a lot of times the goal is to... Okay, so let's go down my philosophy of good storytelling. There's 3 different things that I personally, as a storyteller, try to infuse my stories with. When my reader reads stories, I want them to go away with these 3 things. And they go from intellectually given. So it's intellectually engaging. It leaves you thinking and it sparks your mind. It's not given in a dumb way or unrealistic way. It's realistically portraying reality in an intellectually engaging way constantly growing and getting better in its ability to express reality and express the truths of reality. I want to be emotionally resonant. I wanted to connect with my audience emotionally. I want to be able to take somebody and to we live completely different lives, but connect to them and have these emotions resonate with them. And if they're in a situation that's difficult, they can water almost fell everywhere. Relate to my character. So I want to emotionally connect and then heal. I want to heal, help bring some kind of healing or some kind of main hope. I want to go to that deep, grueling, awful place and infuse it with hope. And that doesn't mean it has to necessarily feel better, but it can help people just to keep on going. I want to help people. But more going on the emotional side, I want to just emotionally connect and help people emotionally heal. My goal is to, when they leave the story, they can leave the story. They have the ability now to be, better. They don't have to come back. A lot of times I feel like cheap media nowadays are about trying to get views, and so you want to keep on clicking because you're waiting for it to happen. I don't want that. I want you to leave the story and it to spark you to now go thrust forward into your life and be inspired to live your life. So anyway, I want it to be intellectually given, emotionally resonant, and I want it to be have moral truth and hope in it. And I went a little bit into this when I was talking about the emotional side, but I want there to be I'm sorry, I'm just flipping you off. I didn't mean to flip you off. I'm sorry. That's not. Now I'm just like, psh, let's count like this. Let's count differently. Let's count like this. No, that's still flipping you off. The middle finger is in the middle. Let's count like this. Like this. There we go. Emotionally given. What? No. Intellectually given, emotionally resonant, and moral truth. Moral truth might sound like preachy. You might think, oh, that is moral truth. A lot of times people view that nowadays as, well, morality is relative. Just do what makes you happy. And it's really an interesting topic to talk about. But I think the important thing is a lot of times when you find truth, and I think people have given up on the search for truth, which I think is a dangerous place to be. There is truth in the world, and don't ever give up on that search, It's a difficult search because you learn that you're wrong, You learn that things you thought were true were not, but it's worth it. It grows you as a person, and it makes you strong, And so, truth, what was I saying about truth? Yeah, when there's moral truth, there's hope. Truth comes along with hope. And sometimes it's not in the way you would think. When I learned about certain symptoms of my ADHD, it was like bad because they were like bad. Like RSD, or rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which I might do a whole video on because it affects me a lot. But it's a symptom of ADHD that is, having overwhelming perceptions, or when you receive rejections, it being even more strong and overwhelming. That was truth I learned, and when I learned it, it wasn't fun. It was like, oh no, this is bad, but it gave me hope because I learned that I wasn't going crazy. There was actually that there was a reason for it, and that's kind of a strange example. Let me give another one. Sometimes you learn truth about things like this person is toxic. You have a clarity moment where you realize a truth that, oh, this person I'm with is toxic, it's not on me. Or you might learn a truth. There's the dramatic irony. What's the play called? The play where the guy marries his mom, and Oedipus Rex, I think it's called. The truth reveal in that one is that he made the prophecy happen, and it's revealed that, oh, he actually married his mom. Plot twists are basically truth reveals. It's interesting. Anyway, I'm getting on a whole tangent, but truth comes along with hope. When you have some truth, you have a thing to believe in, and believing in something gives you some kind of purpose, and that gives you hope. It kind of all happens, and that's why people fall on different religions, to give them hope to live life. And that's why people will fall on, nowadays you'll have in America science, because science is seen as truth, which I have a little gripe with, because I think science should go along with math. Science is a constantly changing thing, but math never changes. So really, math is a little bit more, trustworthy than science. People always say, show me the science. I'm like, show me the science and math. Anyway, that's a tangent. I love math. I wish people did more with math. Math is great. Math is truth. Math is the fundamentals of reality. Anyway, what was I saying? I'm going on so many tangents. But I want intellectually given, emotionally resonant, and I want there to be a moral truth. Something that the audience can hold on to. I've had these happen a lot when I've read books. I've watched movies and stuff, and there was like moral truth in there. There's just like one line that sticks with me. One of the coaches I've had, a public speaking coach, he talked about keeping a little book, and he kept a book, and he wrote down sections of speeches, famous speeches he had seen in like areas in Shakespeare that just resonated with him and just stuck with him. And so I've started doing that. And so there's passages from random shows, Doctor Who or Harry Potter or that kind of stuff, with just truths in there that just resonate. They're just like human, and they just stay with me. And so those are the free building blocks I want to write on as a creator, or make anything as a creator. And if you paid attention, those are actually the free logos, pathos, and logos, pathos, and ethos. I should have known that one. It's like ethos lab. It's logos, pathos, and ethos. The the kind of the free things that help you understand the value of a text. Anyway, but it's the free things. I didn't realize that, and then I realized that because I made this mission of I did my own research when I wanted to become a creator, and I was like, I want to be intellectually giving, and I thought about all the books and stuff I had read and why they resonate so much with me, and I'm like, they're intellectual, they're emotional, and they're moral or ethical, and then I realized there was logos, pathos, and ethos, and I was like, what? Mind blown! It was pretty fun. It was like a really cool moment. Anyway, when we're talking about Christian media, back to the topic. See, I was going to come around. It's been 10 minutes, but I'm coming around. Christian media, the intellectual side, they just kind of chuck out a window. They go to the tallest building, and they go to the very, very top, and they just chuck it out a window. Just throw it out, There's like no intellectual side to Christian media. No. And no representation of reality. Reality isn't displayed in a realistic way. It's all contrived to make the Christian a good guy and the atheist the bad guy. And it's like, there's good atheists and there's really bad Christians. Like, what? It's all contrived, and it's not intellectually given. You can tell that the people behind it aren't making it to get better at their craft and to try to figure out things and have questions themselves. A lot of times when I write, I don't know the answer. I'm writing something and a character's asking, why is this a thing? And I'm like, I don't know. That's a question I have. And by asking the question, I can get the audience asking the question. And sometimes I figure out, and sometimes I don't, and sometimes it's more complicated. And with Christian media, it's just so simplified. The complexities of your ability to dissect moral truths and truths of life and the human experience through media is put into a pot and simmered down into some gross goo and just simplified into this Jesus, just Jesus, this girl's goo. And it's not complex, it's not expanding upon our mind, it's not causing us to think. Instead, it's causing us to turn off our mind and just say Jesus, when God wants us to think. God wants us to use our mind. He says, love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Mind's there, And so he wants you to think intellectually. And so being simplistic is, I would say, against God. I think it's not just bad. I think it's against God because good media creators who are not Christians look at that and be like, look how stupid Christians are. And Christians who do not think intellectually can turn off and just believe anything you're giving to them. And if you aren't thinking intellectually, you won't question the things you believe. And you could be saying some very against God things, thinking it's Christian, maybe saying some very hurtful or just unconnected, if you're unconnected with current situations, So anyway, they're not intellectual. And when it comes to emotional, now that's very interesting. Christian media falls, because it's not intellectual, it's not very realistic. And so when it has emotions, the emotions are not very realistic. The emotional problems are very simplistic. I see simplistic emotions a lot in media nowadays, not just Christian, but a lot in Christian too, where it's just kind of like, I'm sad because my mom died. It's like there's not a deeper complexity to it, which I think is difficult for anybody to make in media. That's when the beauties of a good artist, able to capture complexity of people and of emotions. My goal is always to layer emotions, not just sad, but angry and sad. And the more contrasting the emotions are, a lot of times the more complex. Not always, because art be that way. It's a little bit, there's not rules. But if you take happy and sad and contrast them, it can make a really beautiful complexity in a person in media and resonate with us, because our emotions are complicated. I'm back. Somebody had to come in the car and look for something. You see, this is the life of having a big family. No matter where you go, there's always a person. Back to what I was saying. I have to remember what I was saying. Emotional complexity. And really, since they're not realistic, because they're not thinking intellectual, they're not displaying intellectual reality, they're not realistic. And so the emotions tend to be very simplistic. Not just that, the emotions are solved in a simplistic way. I think art is more than just expressing emotions. It's about expressing emotions and finding some kind of truth in them. But it can also just be about expressing emotions. Really, it can be anything, because that's the deal with art. There are no rules. But I think in Christian media, a lot of times you have to solve the emotions. That's the idea in Christianity in general. You have, if I were to be honest about my depression as a Christian, a lot of times I get Christians come to me and say, well, you can't be depressed because God is hope. And I'm like, yes, God is hope, but sometimes I be sad. And it's ridiculous to think that way, because let's think about it. One of the most honest, very most honest texts ever in history is the Psalms. We just look to the Psalms, and David is constantly swinging in this bipolar way, and he has this rage and this just raw, and he's just vomiting out all of his just angst to God, and more than angst, just despair. And see, it's alright to, one of the things Tim Keller says, amazing preacher, he says, he quotes Princess Bride, and in the Princess Bride it says, life is pain, princess. Anybody telling you otherwise is trying to sell you something. First of all, love that movie. Second of all, great quote. So many great quotes. But that's a great quote because he says Christianity is not trying to sell you something. Christianity is honest. Christianity says life is pain. That's the reality. It's unfair, it's painful, and sometimes you just feel bad for the sake of feeling bad. And there is the good story problem. And Christian media falls heavy in the good story problem for this reason. And the good story problem is when in stories, there's a story structure. Many times they follow a kind of 3-act story structure, or hero's journey, or 8-act, whatever act you want to follow. There's several different structures. But the story structure tends to have the darkest moment happen before the very high. And it's tend to be like the belly of the whale, the darkest hour, And then you have the climax, and it's for that to contrast it. But a lot of times, the darkest moment involves mental illness, because that can be a very complex, and more than that, it can be a very interesting, more than that, resonant way of showing your characters really struggling. So self-hate, suicidality a lot of times tends to be in the darkest hour. A character on the edge of a bridge before the climax. Hello Future Me has a great episode about darkest hours I was just watching, and so does Red from Overly Sarcastic Productions, and both of them talk about this issue. And the issue is when it's at the lowest of the low for the character, and it's right before the high in stories. And that's to make this contrast so it's more cathartic. But in reality, in real life, life doesn't go like that. A lot of times your lowest point in your journey of mental healing and mental illness will be in the middle of your journey. It won't be right before you get better. You have some realization, or somebody's there to help you, or you find a way to defeat the bad guy and everything's great again. It will instead be the middle. And so a lot of stories have this, and it's because we take stories and we apply them to our lives, kind of like coding, and this can be something we need to be aware of, And so when you have the good story issue, it says your lowest low will be right before your high. But in mental illness, it's not like that. A lot of times it's the middle, and that can be dangerous because people can just feel more than people can feel. It spreads a lie about mental illness, that if somebody's struggling with mental illness, they just need to figure something out, or they find some conclusion and they're able to get out of that funk and defeat the bad guy. Or that you need to figure out a way and the pressure's on you and then you can get out of the funk. Or that you're about to. When it's more complex than that, and making anything more simplistic than it is, it's always dangerous. Basically, or always. Sometimes. Basically, always. Especially when it comes to things like this, like emotions and people. So, the simple story problem is just the what was it? The happy story problem? I think it was something like that. Is about that. And you see this a lot in Christian media, where the problem will be solved by the end. A character has an addiction, it's so bad, but then they meet Jesus and it's over, And I mean, some people's journeys are like that, but not everybody's. And I can personally speak to this because I struggle with different things, and just having Jesus won't make them better a lot of times. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. And blaming the person for that is always wrong, because it's all about God. But to say, oh, you're still struggling with that, that's your fault, you need to lean on God more, is absolute bullcrap. I mean, excuse my French. No, I'm joking. Because it's just more complex than that. It could be a physical problem. There could be something wrong with your hormones. It could be a situational problem. It could be an existential problem, or relational, emotional. It could be a moral problem. Or it could be just all of these overlapping, And so trying to boil it down to, oh, you need to pray this prayer and then you feel better, is so wrong in reality, and so wrong if you put it into media, because it just won't give anybody hope, It's not that resonant. And it just shows what the goal is for these people making these movies or whatever. Their goal is no longer to get better at an art, to engage in art. It's to try to push Jesus, which, I mean, Jesus is great, but when you value a message over your plot and your story and the art itself, then your story will fall flat. You are no longer writing a story, you're writing an essay, which is great. You could write an essay. But storytelling is supposed to be creative, not just saying, Jesus. Not your characters getting on a soapbox, That's one of the problems I had with the God's Not Dead movies. Let me just speak a little smack here. Oh my gosh, those movies. I think the third was better, but I'm not sure, I didn't see it. But, at the end, there was the professor, and he was evil because he was an evolutionist. Oh, but he was evolutionist because his mom died. And at the end, he gets hit by a car, and right before he dies, he becomes a Christian. Wow. It was... it wasn't intellectually done and emotionally resonant. It was emotionally simplistic, and the reality they bent our reality to try to show a narrative that isn't always true, Not all atheists are some wielding angry people that had something bad happen to them. That's why they're atheists. A lot of times atheists are atheists because they want to be intellectually engaged. And Christians are no longer intellectually engaging in science and in the arts. They're trying to, Christianity, like I said, separated from science and from art. And so nowadays Christians view that as a bad thing, which is absolutely horrible. But a lot of atheists are atheists because they want to engage their mind, not because they had their mom died or something. I forget what the tragic backstory was. Though some might be, it's more complex than that. And it might be both, You can't simplify it. And so then we get to moral truth. And this is where it gets interesting. I think a lot of Christian media values the moral truth way too much. Their point in making media is to give some moral truth, is to push some moral truth. They have this idea. Maybe the idea is God is good. And then they put somebody through something hard, and at the end, they make the character stand up and be like, God was really good. And then it's like, yay, that's the moral truth. But I don't think that's how, or at least that's not how I approach media. And I think it has negative effects on the art you're creating if you just focus on the moral truth and not the intellectual, emotional side of art. And it's all about moral truth. Because if you're not focusing on the intellectual, emotional side, you will not engage your audience's thinking, and you will not emotionally connect with them. And so the truth will just bounce off of them. It won't strike their hearts, It won't hit them and be like, yeah, that's right. And it won't stay with them. Instead, it'll just bounce off them and be like, stop talking, And this comes, I think all of these problems comes from their goal. And I've talked about this. Christians in Christian media, now their goal is no longer seeing God in art. Their goal is to just push Jesus, Their goal is evangelism. But let me tell you a secret. Let me tell you a little secret. My goal in creating art is not evangelism. My goal is to have a relationship with God. My art is not about sharing Jesus. And that's a really interesting idea I've thought about before. I'm not really, all of us are called to be missionaries in our different areas, but it's not like I'm over here trying to evangelize for my media. It's different. And the way to explain it is God has always spoken to me through media, through stories. Not all of them Christian, many not Christian, because I'm really into stories that stereotypically or typically in our culture are not geared to, not made by Christians. So sci-fi, fantasy, and all of those sorts of fun stuff. And so I suck up these movies, you know, The Matrix, Star Wars, um, uh, many more. Hunger Games, that's a good one. And truths, I find them and I'm just engaged by them. And God speaks to me through that ever since I was very young. I mean, I was 4 years old making fan fiction, no joke. There was this TV show I liked on PBS that I used to make fan fiction of. It was about these aliens that learned about science. Anyway, embarrassing stories aside, media has always resonated to me, and I had always seen God in media, and it's just, I see him all the time in media. I think all big stories have something that gives truth to God. I mean, why stories resonate with us is because they're reflective of the gospel, and I think that's absolutely beautiful. And why they're not realistic to reality is because we live in the current age of the fall, and God hasn't returned yet, and when he returns, all stories will be made realistic, you know, to reality. It's kind of like Jordan Peterson talks about the narrative world and the real world, and the collision of that, those two worlds, was Jesus, and him coming and die on the cross, which is really cool. Anyway, back to what I was saying, my art is not about trying to share Jesus. My art is about learning about God. I made a short story about this. It's called May I Have This Dance. But one of the inspirations of this short story was the idea that I'm not writing for other people. I do want to write for other people because I love people, and stories have affected me, and I want to be able to connect and affect other people in good ways and give good to people's lives, to give good into the world. But it's not about other people. Some people are just not going to like your stories. Bernard Sanderson has a good quote about that. You know, some people, they're just not going to like it because it's not their taste. It's not that you wrote a bad story, it's just not going to be their taste. And some people will just ignore it, you know, and that's all right. You know, it's all right because that's what art is, you know, different people's taste. But my art isn't necessarily about trying to evangelize. Instead, it's about learning about God through my art. I do my art and I learn more about him. It's a form of worship. I do it with him, and as I write, I learn about him through these different experiences my characters are having, and individual ways they see God. And as I write, I grow deeper in relationship with him. I create because I'm made in the image of a creative God, and that's how I relate to him. You know, I see him in that, and I connect to him in that, and so it's worship for me, you know? It's a form of just connecting with God. So that means no matter what, I'm going to keep writing. You know, if the spotlight's on me, if the spotlight's not, I'm going to keep writing because it's how I see God and I connect with God and I love God. I love him through writing and through making media. And so I'm constantly trying to get better at my craft. And also, I'm a fan of what I make, you know? I'm not over here like, you know, I think some people have ideas of authors being like, ooh, did you see that plot twist coming? I'm so clever. The audience will be so excited. Which, I mean, some authors are probably like that. But for me, I'm like a fan of the stories I create. I see a place where I want a story to be there and there isn't. And so I try to create a story that would fill in that gap, you know? And so the gap I want to fill in is Christian sci-fi and fantasy. But I'm a fan of my own stories. I'm like, what's going to happen next? I'm such a discovery writer when it comes to that. But back to what I was saying, art for me isn't about trying to evangelize to people. It's about connecting to people and learning about the human condition and learning about just life and asking questions and expressing and connecting. And through that, I get to learn more about God, and glory is given to him. I don't have to work really hard to try to push some moral truth Instead, I can relax and I can just express myself and search for God and look for truth, and through just this beautiful method, which is called art, I'm able to find truths and just, see something beautiful, and I want to make something beautiful. So anyway, that was a long rant. I think a lot of Christian media is suffering because they don't have the goal to have a relationship with God through their art. My goal in art is to have a relationship with God. When I'm doing art, I'm relating to Him. It's how we connect. I always do writing with Him. It's not me, it's Him writing. I'm just in the backseat. I'm being the mouthpiece. But it's never about, we gotta spread Jesus. It's more about just relating God and getting better at my craft, and pushing myself to the limits, And so I would like to just call out Christians in media, like, get your stuff together. And particularly in movies and TV shows. I think music, there's some great musicians out there, like Toby Mac, who I'm personally inspired by, or NF, he's great. Torrin Wells, Holland, Jamie Grace, there's so many. Anyway, there's some really good musicians, but I think on the side of Christian movies, TV shows, and currently books, there can be some just really simplistic stuff. I would love to see a Christian book where it's a Christian book, but the bad guy's a Christian. I'm working on one currently that's like that, because Christians can be bad, and maybe the good guy is a atheist. And I mean, you can, through that, try to dissect these different beliefs, and maybe somebody becomes Christian, somebody, beliefs might change in your characters, or they may not, but it's not about pushing Christ, it's about doing this art. I think a lot of times Christian media has to have that accept Jesus moment, and we view this a lot when it comes to evangelizing. People always talk about getting the person to say the Lord's Prayer, but you know what, that's not what evangelism should be. Evangelism should be just sowing a seed, praying with somebody on the bus. Whether you know if they accepted Christ or not, it doesn't matter. You just go up to somebody and say, hey, you want me to pray for you? That's a really good opening. A lot of people will say, yeah, sure. And you can just let God speak from that point. But it's not about trying to get them to pray and accept Jesus. Instead, it's just planting a seed, and it might grow. It might not. I don't know. Wherever that person needs, being what they need, and showing Christ what they need. Christ didn't go around being like, I'm the Savior, accept me. He just was what people needed. The woman at the well, he said what that woman needed. He said to the rich young ruler what he needed, And he was God, so he was perfect, so, it's not like... Anyway, but just, you see this reflected in Christian media, where there's this idea where you need to get to this triumphant evangelism moment, and it kind of goes into that good story problem where the evangelism moment tends to be the moment they accept Jesus, and that's the climax. And before then, they were really against Jesus, and then they accept Jesus, and it's like, what? But that's just so simplistic. I mean, Christians can have problems too. It's not that they accept Jesus and then your life is great. And I think it can be done so much more better, and so much more complex and engaging and hopeful to people, and just give people hope when you just try to capture real people. And that's always the tip I give when people are struggling in writing. Just try to capture real people. Live life, and then write that, And that's just helpful for me personally. I think about this when I'm writing certain characters. Like my first book, Sue, one of the major characters, doesn't even become a Christian in it. And Olivia too. They're kind of parallel. There's fun stuff there. Anyway, it's not about, trying to get to the moment to accept Jesus. It's just about writing people and connecting to people. And sometimes that means there might be a triumphant acceptance. Sometimes there'll be a quiet acceptance, sometimes there'll be a slow thing. You know, it's about what that person, that character needs. So anyway, rant, simplified. There's three main things in media that are important to me: emotional connection, intellectually given, and moral hope. And Christian media tends to lean on the moral hope, preaching to the audience, almost like a sermon, instead of the other two. And so it bounces right off the audience, because this audience isn't looking for a sermon, they're looking for a story that can get them thinking and connect with and give them some hope. And so the problem is their goal is focused on the moral truth instead of sitting back and getting better at their art. They're not focusing on expressing and exploring thoughts and ideas, but they're instead focusing on what's this amazing moral truth we're going to give. And that's because they have more of an evangelistic idea versus a artist idea. And so I encourage Christian artists to just get better at their craft. By creating, you are doing what God wants you to do. You know, God made us creative in the image of Him. He created the earth, you know, He created us. And so He wants us to create because if we do something that reflects God, you know, then we're reflecting God. That's great, you know. And so I encourage people to just be more intellectual when it comes to their art, emotionally engaging when it comes to their art, and just write life, you know, write what you see around you and what you think could be cool. Ask questions and just enjoy it. That's what it should be. It should be enjoying. It should be pushing yourself, but it should be enjoyable. And just have fun with God with it, you know? And that will make your art so much more resonant, because it'll no longer be about trying to get people, but instead it's about just enjoying the art, the act of making art. Sometimes it's difficult and it pushes you, but it's amazing because you get to explore depths of yourself and of the world and of God. And it's so beautiful. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Leave all your thoughts below. It's a complex topic and I would love to talk more about it because I have a lot to say about media and stories and people and God. And my ideas are constantly changing because as a person we learn and grow. And I'm very young, and so my ideas are probably going to change. But I like thinking about these things and they're fun. I don't know how to finish. I think this is an important thing to address as a Christian who cares about media. I see that Christians are more and more villainizing art, and art is becoming more and more simplistic for that reason, because Christianity is supposed to make art more complex, not less complex. Christianity should make art more interesting, more emotionally engaging, and more hopeful, not less. And so let's get our stuff together. The moral of the story, get your stuff together. Anyway, I wish you all guys a good time on your writing journey, on your whatever you're up to, creative journey, or on just your journey in life. And I hope this could just be a fun video that made you think or smile or just angrily scoff as you go, ha, she was wrong. Which I probably was. I'm just talking. Love you all. Wish you a wonderful night. I'm gonna go get ready for work. I'm very excited. Wish me good luck. Talk to you later. Go be awesome.